Good morning, everybody. Just give me 1 second to very abruptly stop the music. Thank you very much for joining, and welcome to Learn Anywhere with Apple. So we've got quite a packed roster for you today. My name is James Dancer. I'm Group Technical Director at Academia, so I'm hosting. And because there's a packed roster, you're probably going to see me doing this quite a lot while I'm looking at some copious notes that our marketing team have written for me to make sure I remember everything. So yeah, just apologies for that up front there. So we've got a few people to talk to you today. So we've got Mark Byrne from Apple to talk to you about Apple in further and higher education. Shaun Hides from Coventry University to talk about their one-to-one learning model. Liam Doyle from Apple Financial Services, and myself to talk about some IT stuff. So before we get started, just a very sort of short little bit of housekeeping. I see a lot of you have already figured out how to use the chat, which is great. Please bear in mind that where you type in the chat in the comment box, there's a little bubble button on the top right-hand side that changes from chat mode to question mode. And basically what that does is puts a little red Q next to the message that you then send. So when we get to the Q&A section, we can scan pretty easily and figure out who's asking a question and who's just sort of chatting and stuff. So. And also, if you forget to do that, not a problem. We have Ryan from our marketing team moderating. So if he notices a question that hasn't been flagged as one, he'll then hit the red Q button for you. Just please, if or as and when we're getting to your questions in the Q&A section, we are going to be unmarking them as we're answering them. So please don't remark them back as a question. Otherwise, it gets very confusing. So that's kind of happened a couple of times on webinars. And the last bit to bear in mind is that there is a 10-second delay between us and you guys. That gives us the ability to hit a panic button if anything untoward happens, but it does mean that if you're chatting to us, it's not quite real time. There's a bit of a 10-second delay. So we're going to try and prompt any interaction before we sort of want to interact, just to kind of close that gap a little bit. So that is pretty much it from me until we're in between sessions. So I'm going to hand over to Mark Byrne from Apple, who I think is just voice only.
Wonderful. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for your time this morning. I know certainly more than ever, time and energy is so precious at the moment. So thanks ever so much for giving over an hour this morning to talk with us and kind of hear from the guys. So from us at Apple and Academia and Shaun, thanks ever so much for attending. I've been fortunate enough to meet a number of people that I know are on the call. So for those, quick hello. For those that I haven't met today, I just wanted to let you know what I do within Apple. So my name is Mark Byrne, and I sit within the higher education team from a global and regional perspective. And my responsibility is to do two things, actually. One is to come and listen to you guys as a sector and as universities to understand the challenges and the opportunities that you see for the future, and then to take the very vast portfolio that Apple has to offer to see what we can do to help you support in those endeavours. So with that in mind, I perhaps just wanted to spend a minute or two just to give a bit of a context for today and some of the things that we're looking to do today, but also into the near future as well. So over the last 2-3 months, I must have joined over 50 conversations and kind of similar webinars around scenario planning. And what we found is that as people are looking at September and beyond, there's a number of things that have come to the top. And that's come across a number of areas. So it's come across for staff and students, and it's come across those three areas of working, teaching and learning. And I suppose the challenge that everybody's facing at the moment is, with all of the unknowns and on all of the different potential scenarios that may unfold, what can be done practically and tangibly over the coming months to plan for September and beyond from that perspective. And what we've seen is that there's five things. There's five things that come to the top. And what I'd like to do today is talk you through those five things. So James, I wondered if you could move the next slide on for us, please, if that's okay. And as we go through these, what I'd like to do is talk to you about some of the stuff that we're gonna go deeper on today, but also talk to you about some of the stuff that we would like to share with you at a later date. So given that we've got the hour, we felt that there was a couple of areas that would be worth expanding on to today. But as I said, there's so much that we can offer in some of these other areas that we're going to run some other sessions and provide some other resources. But let me talk you down these five areas. So the first is around IT readiness. So this is where people have said, look, for September and beyond, what do we do? How do we do this from an IT perspective? So if we wanted to, from a department or even a faculty level, or even an institution level, we would like to be up and running for September. What are the tools? What are the services? What is the support that you'd be able to provide us? And actually working really closely with the guys at academia, we've put a number of how-tos. So some how-to guides, some how-to support, and some how-to services to do just that. The other thing that's come to the top is logistics. So, you know, what do we do in terms of if people are not coming onto site, either members of staff or students, be they second, third, postgrads or kind of incoming students. If we can't actually get people onto site, what do we do in order to get facilities, services and technologies out to those guys? And then what do we do to help them get up and running? So I think there's two aspects to that. So the first is the secure delivery and the logistics of potentially getting hundreds of different things to hundreds of different people, maybe up and down the country. And then the second bit is that once you've got it into your hands, what do you do in order to help people get set up in the easiest and most meaningful way? So how do you get people up and running and comfortable with the experience that everybody wants to see? And once again, working really closely with the guys at academia, we've got some really practical how-to services in terms of that. And James, a little bit later, will talk through certainly the IT readiness and touch upon some of that secure delivery stuff as well. So I won't talk too much more about that. I'll let James talk about that in a little bit more detail later. The other thing that we're going to go deeper on today is the support that we can provide from Apple Financial Services. So Liam has kindly joined us from the team within Apple Financial Services. And what Liam has been doing in terms of helping to answer the questions and the challenges that have been posed by universities across the sector is to come up with a number of affordable but very flexible but also very straightforward ways of being able to implement something over the coming weeks and months. So what Liam will delve into is some of the aspects of that. But I think one of the things that Apple Financial Services have done really well is that they've been very mindful of time and time scale, and that certain universities will want to do particular things in the very short term. So what do I need to do now? And if I actually only needed to do this for 6 months, or if I only needed to do it for 12 months, how could I do that? And how flexible and affordable could that be? And then we've got other universities saying, well, actually, if what we wanted to do was have a look at this from a longer term perspective, but actually have a look at a way in which we can be more flexible in terms of the payments, what does that look like? And Liam has come up with a number of different scenarios and solutions to be able to support all of those particular asks and challenges. And Liam will talk through that in a little bit more detail. What we also would like to do, but we didn't want to do too much today. And we wanted to concentrate, as I said, on those two first things, which was the IT readiness and the logistics, and then the flexible, affordable finance, because they're very, very much kind of practical pillars to supporting people as they head towards September. But there are some other really important areas that continually come to the top. So one of those is, how can you help in terms of designing and embedding and creating the best experiences around teaching, learning and well-being. Now, the great thing is we've got some phenomenal experience, both internationally and nationally, and also across various subsectors within education. So if you have a look at the challenges that are being faced by schools today, and by colleges and by universities, then whilst there are differences, there's a lot of similarities in terms of that design and delivery. So what we would like to do is do two things. So the first is that I'll be sharing via the guys at academia some resources that we have curated with higher education in mind. So after this session, we'll just make sure that those go out to everybody that wishes to receive that. But what we will also be doing is we'll be running another session with the teaching, learning and well-being aspects, and rolling that also into the last point, which is assistive technology, because that comes up probably in every single conversation. So what can we do to empower everybody, but from a distance, and what can assistive technologies be done to set up, but also what can they do in terms of helping people in those at distance situations. So as I said, they're kind of really big subjects in their own right. So what we'll be doing is we'll be spending a little bit more time going through those in another session. So Ryan and the guys will be in contact over the coming days to let you know about those. So that's it from me in terms of the context. So as I said, this is very much just a replay of what people have been asking of us. These are the 5 areas that are really important, as you guys have described to us, in terms of, can you get some how-to, practical, tangible services and support in place to help us do these things by September. What I'll also do is just one last thing is we'll also be going very deep with a particular sector within university, which is media and the creativity sector. So I think Neil Boyer's on the line today as well. So Neil will be running a separate session. So anybody that's interested in the creativity and the media side specifically, the guys at academia and Apple will be running a separate session. So with that, I would just like one last piece of interactivity before I pass back to James, which I just want to run a quick poll if that's okay. So what we'll be doing is we'd love to get your view across those 5 areas. If you could tell us which of those areas, and it might be all of them, are important to you. But also if there's anything that you would like to add to that list. So if there's another, then we would love to hear about that as well. So, you know, they're the original 5 that people have said, can you help us with? But if there's another one that's on the tip of your tongue that you would like some support or help with, then we would love to hear about that. And if we can, we certainly will look to support and help. And with that, I'll pass you back to James to run the quick poll, and then pass you over to Shaun. Thank you ever so much for your time.
All right, and I've just realised I'm in completely the wrong place because we reloaded the room. There we go. Okay, so poll's looking interesting. I feel like I want to be some kind of sports commentator on it, because there's always a winner and then it kind of goes down a little bit and another one comes up. So in terms of areas that are of particular interest to you, I mean, we probably could have guessed this, but IT readiness and deployment is currently coming out top. That's at 36%. It's like kind of ticking back and forth. Secure delivery and setup to home is at 12. That's interesting. Again, big hot topic at the moment. Flexible, affordable financial solutions. That's great. That's 15% at the moment. So, Liam, absolutely no pressure when you're doing your bit. teaching, learning and wellbeing as well. That's always something that's quite high. And then a bit of interest in assistive technology as well. So that's really good to see. I'm just going to end that poll now. I'll give it another couple of seconds because there's still balance is changing by the second. And that is the end. So IT readiness and deployment, 43%. That's, understandable. Secure delivery and setup and teaching, learning and wellbeing were kind of teetering around alongside one another for that. So those are those, and then affordable financial solutions next. So that gives us a bit of context for what we're all talking about later. Obviously, no pressure on me whatsoever for IT readiness and deployment, since that's come out top. We'll have a little session on that later. But for the moment, I'm going to play a quick video, a case study video that we've done on Coventry University, and after that, Shaun Hides from Coventry will be coming on to talk a little bit about their situation. But what I would ask, because Shaun has a bit of a hard stop, is if you have any questions for him specifically, if you could ask those right now, either during the video or while he's talking. We'll give a couple of minutes for a Q&A just after that section before we go into funding for one-to-one learning with Liam. So I'm going to leave you with the video for the moment. I'll be back in a second.
Coventry University has had university status since 1992. It's a so-called modern university. We are incredibly fast growing, so we're now over 34,000 students. In 2012, we were at the point where we were looking at replacing server-based desktop solution for video editing. And our feeling was that we needed something much more flexible. We needed a solution that gave our students access to technology and the ability to learn 24/7. And the more that we thought about it, the more that a one-to-one laptop deployment seemed to make more and more sense.
All the students in the media areas have the laptops, and this enables us then to free up spaces. So when we did a sort of cost-based analysis on it, we realised that the value of our rooms was also something we had to take into account. The advantage is space. The students come in and they have access to the machines all the time.
As a learning support mechanism, the advantages were so far outweighed any other possible solution that for us it was an easy decision to make.
We've supplied 1,800 MacBooks in a 7-year period. Academia work very closely with the university to ensure that there is physical resource on site to be able to support that handout. It's really important that the experience for students is slick and that they get that wow moment when the university hand over a brand new device for them to use.
When we hand out the machines to the students on the distribution day, they're all ready to go. Software's installed, all the licensing is done, basically handed over to the students. They have to set up their own accounts on the machines, but essentially the machine is there and ready to roll.
I've been involved in the MacBook scheme for about 3 years now, and the great thing from my point of view as well is the software, because they can basically use the software in real time when I'm teaching it, so I can actually check whether they understand, whether they're doing it right.
Love to use it for editing programs. I use Photoshop on it, so that's really good for when I'm taking pictures. I also edit on it in Premiere Pro. We also do a bit of coding, so it's really smooth, everything is working perfectly on it, so I really enjoy that about it.
Everything's so efficient on there, even the mouse pad, the way you use it. Everything runs so quickly on there, all the Adobe software, it's perfect for our course.
All the software I need is on it, and it's a really nice machine, it's a really powerful one, so it really helps me complete my projects and have everything done in time. To be really honest with you, I wouldn't have been able to complete my course if I didn't have a MacBook.
So for me, every moment is amazing. Each time when I'm there and I have to teach the software, and there's never going to be a shortage because everyone has them, and they can all follow along with me. So for me, that's absolutely great.
MacBook Pro is an incredibly capable piece of kit. It enables our students to produce an amazing range of audio, visual, web-based content.
It's a level playing field for students. Something that's really, really important for us here, that we ensure that no matter what the background of the student, is that they have similar equipment and access to equipment across the board.
They always point out how happy they are to be here, and some of them actually said that this has been a decisive factor whether they chose Coventry University or not. The fact that they get issued with this machine that they can then take away with them and use for their coursework and for their projects.
We've had briefing sessions with the UK Parliament and the European Parliament about how this has all worked, so I think there's a level of recognition that something interesting and exciting has happened here. So success at a number of levels.
It was an idea that was brought in to give the students more flexibility of working, make them work more professionally, and allow them to work more independent of being on site. And this is something that's been clearly successful for our student body, and therefore we have continued with the programme.
We have seen an incredible transformation of the way that we think about teaching and learning. We have reviewed this project every couple of years and have continued to want to deploy it. Can only see this scheme continuing and expanding in the future. It's been a hugely successful scheme for us, and one that we really hope continues with, an exciting future.
Okay, so in fact that's my prompt from marketing to remember to play the video, so I'm just going to move over. So Shaun is here to talk to you about Coventry's experience. You saw him in the video. Shaun, are you around? Can I hear you? Do you want to do a little mic test for me and camera test if you're... There we go.
Hit me.
Excellent, all good. So I'm going to hand over to Shaun and I'll come back afterwards. Thanks, guys.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Glad to see such a busy room. I just thought that what I would do would be quickly go through picking out some of the kind of key decision points for us in coming to this one-to-one scheme, and then leave as much time as I could to answer any questions that people have got. I think in large part, the video kind of tells the story quite well. But I think there's some underlying things that were in our thinking that I'm going to go through now. The first of those is that core idea. So I think everybody realizes we're in a very particular moment now, and lots of you may be in the room thinking about the idea of going to mobile solutions more generally, or one-to-one schemes, because of this current moment. And I think it's important to note that we made this decision nearly 10 years ago, and for a particular sort of group of students in a media department. So we deployed to all the students in what was then the media department. It's now become a bigger school of media and performing arts. And we were doing it for a particular set of reasons to do, again, it's outlined in the video, to do with the replacement of some desktop technology. But I think the really key thing to understand is that we had a driving idea that sat below that technology decision, which was about understanding how we could best utilize a kind of restricted space resource and also maximize the benefit for students by adopting quite radical teaching and learning strategy, which at the time we called open media, which was about enabling students to be able to learn and practice whenever and wherever they were, as opposed to only when they could get access to our resources. And so I think that idea of 24/7 access, and something that Paul Smith mentions in the video about leveling the playing field, were really important driving factors in what we were trying to do. Somebody gave me the analogy while we were having these conversations about Dad's Army, that, in the stereotype picture of Dad's Army, somebody turns up with a 18th century hunting rifle, somebody turns up with a broom, somebody turns up with a modern weapon, and everybody's in different places. And we wouldn't do that with a desktop installation of machines for an IT lab. So why would we do that when we were trying to get people to work in a mobile way? So I think that core idea of what we were trying to achieve in making students have access flexibly and more on their own terms was a real driving factor for us. And I think the second thing that speaks to is that then had a whole series of implications for our teaching and learning strategy. We adopted quite a different pedagogic model. It affected the way that we timetabled classes. And every aspect of teaching, learning, assessment was impacted by the decision to go to a mobile learning solution. So I think that idea and the driving idea is really important to this. And so I guess I would say that in these times, there'll be several different ideas in this room of why this kind of deployment will be important. But I think take if you can a bit of time to think through the consequences of that driving idea, whatever that driving idea is for you. I think the second thing that was again hinted at in the film, but maybe it could be drawn out a little bit more, is the people that you need to get involved in this. So I think it's really, really important to have buy-in in a number of ways. So I mean, the simplest way to conceive it is horizontally and vertically. In order to get this to work inside your institutions, you're going to need buy-in right to the senior level of the institution. You're going to need sponsors for a project of this kind and this scale, and you will need to have the staff on board, because for whatever environment you're in, I mean, I think there's possibly people from Teesside in the room, and maybe you've already done that journey, but I think there is a transition period, and people are very attached to platforms. And if you're going to change the platform because you change the technology, then there will be conversations that you need to have. And I think you need to bring in both those people who from the start will be supportive, and you've got to pay attention to and bring on board those who are going to be to some degree unwilling. And I think you're also going to need to think about this across functions. So moving to a one-to-one scheme like this, requires you to get senior leadership buy-in, requires ITS, it requires your procurement team, it will require conversations with legal and with the students. So that spread of people, it's important to involve them as early as you can in the conversations, because trust me, if you do this, it will affect quite a lot of different aspects of how you work. And then I think the last thing to say is the things that will be impacted, and the actual things you need to do, and the things that you need to acquire in order to do this. So for one very simple instance of that is we made a conscious decision to move to a one-to-one laptop scheme. So the only technologies that we have to provide computing access for our students are laptops. We've got a very minimal deployment of desktop machines inside that school now. There are some desktop machines in photography. There are some desktop machines driving other bits of kit, so digital printing, for example. And there are a small number of very, very high-end machines that are doing some of the kind of high-end coding things. But the default approach to IT in that school is mobile, and that has consequences in terms of peripherals, that has consequences in terms of how you have to make your system accessible to those students. On-site, off-site is something you've got to think about really early. And for example, one of the things we made that was a mistake, it's an interesting mistake, we were going to use screen sharing and air share between staff and students, and then we found out that the university, and we should have known this, but we found out nearly 10 years ago, the university was obviously operating two networks, one for staff and one for students, so you couldn't actually do that. And it was a problem it took us a long time to crack. So those consequences for the platform and the technology are not always immediately obvious. But you're going to need to think about your physical infrastructures. You're going to need to think about how your laptops interface with fixed desktop computing. You've got to think about things like the processors. I mean, academia have been incredibly supportive and helpful with us in terms of logistic support or deployment and support for students afterwards. But necessarily there's issues around ownership of the laptop, who owns it, at what points, therefore legal need to be involved. You've got to think about protection of the equipment and things like insurance and who takes out the insurance. So there's a whole sort of concomitant series of things that flow from such a scheme. They're all fixable. I don't want to present them as problems, but they're things that the ramifications of doing this are quite widespread. And I think the last thing to say about it is on the upside, we have experienced a huge uplift in the students' engagement and participation in how they learn and what they produce, and a real transformation of how we think about teaching and learning. And so those other things that will change will be how you do a whole load of stuff that you didn't really intend to change in the first place. So I think it has really positive and profound effects in a number of ways, which maybe will come out in the Q&A, or if people want to contact me separately and directly, I'm pretty easy to find. So if there's further questions on from this, then I'm happy to get involved in the conversation. I think probably it'd be best if we get into some Q&A now. So if people have got particular questions, and if you want to push them at me, then that would be great.
We've got a few, Shaun, which is good. So I'm going to fire these at you. Let's see how it works rapid fire. So first one, with regards to one-to-one, have you experienced any issues with loss or damage of device? If so, what have you done to try and mitigate this?
It's going to happen. It will happen. And how can I say this? I'm sure this is being recorded, so I need to be diplomatic. It may not be the students that are the worst offenders. I had one member of staff who managed to bend 2 MacBook Pros in the space of 6 months, and I mean literally bend them, wrecked them. That's just the cost. I mean, you can't offset that, and I think that happens, but it happens with students. So we have a requirement upon students on they sign an agreement between themselves and the university. As part of that, there's a condition that they insure the laptop. We did in the first year or so, maybe slightly into the second year, have some people who were signing those agreements like everybody agrees license terms and conditions on software, i.e. you tick it because you want it and you don't read it. And there were a couple of cases where students hadn't produced insurance, and we had a lot of crying. And we sorted it out. We found a way around, but you are going to have to anticipate that will happen. There will be losses, there will be thefts, there will be damage. It's not a huge number in our experience. Students do look after these bits of kit. You need to think about who owns it at what points. So if the student if it's made explicit that the student doesn't own it, they take less care. If there's a feeling that they do own it, then they tend to look after it better. It's probably the best way to put it. But yeah, insurance and you need to anticipate it.
Excellent, thanks for that. I've turned my camera off because I've realised nobody wants to look at me staring at questions. So you are now the star of the show again, Shaun. So I've got a couple of questions that are loosely related to the same thing, so I'm going to bundle those together. How does the software license model work if it is a paid-for application? And how is software licensed to the laptops? Are they regarded as personal or uni devices?
Good question. We've been in both situations, and it works best. So the deployment that we have is that the machines remain the property of the university until the student graduates, and then we hand the laptop to the student on graduation. So they have to successfully complete the course, and then they get the laptop. So one of the reasons we made that decision was precisely because of the licensing arrangement. It's actually got better over time, and providers like Adobe have shifted their licensing in a way that makes it easier, and so it's effectively legally it's a university machine until they graduate. Experientially, it's the student's machine, and they're expected to look after it. So that's one of those things that's in the messaging. But simple picture, legally, they remain the university machine until they graduate. Therefore, the licensing is handled. As Craig said in the video, when the student gets to the laptop, all the software is on there. They're all, the license agreement's preloaded.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Right, next. Coventry replaced dedicated specialist computers with MacBooks. How much specialist equipment on the media course do they now have compared to before the start of the project, and likewise open access computers? I know you kind of touched on it in what you were saying, but I don't know if there's anything more you want to add.
Yeah, so we had one of the biggest deployments of Avid, desktop Avid and server setup in the Ellen Terry building beforehand. So I think we had, this is going back a long time. We had a 35 station installation, and we now have got down to less than half a dozen high-end editing and post-production machines. We've also grown the number of students. So when we had the 35 desktop Avid installation, we probably had about high 40s, 50 students on the media production course. We're now over 100. So the number of students has expanded, but the number of desktop installations has reduced. The students have access to the campus-wide open access desktop labs like everybody else. Interestingly, our students tend to use a couple of spaces in the library very heavily. One of those is the third floor of the library, which some people may be familiar with. It's called the Disruptive Media Learning Lab. That has some very high-end PCs and some desktop Macs in there, but most often you see our students in there with their laptops. There's not a... We've not experienced a problem. I mean, as soon as people have identified that there are, there's software or there's applications that we need that won't run on the MacBooks, then we try to address that. But it's easier to deal with, and it's more efficient. You can't get over the difference. The thing that I would point people at as a key persuading factor for us was we did the maths on how often students could get access to the Avid Edit suite. With 3 years and master students, when they can access in daytimes when there's technical support around in term time, it starts looking like a very poorly used resource. So I think that's the flip.
Okay. Wow, it's like coming in thick and fast now. I hope you've got a nice glass of water next to you, Shaun. Where do Coventry University students store their data? That's just two questions in one. How does Wi-Fi connectivity experience? How does the Wi-Fi connectivity experience compare with previously presumably wired on-campus shared desktop computer connectivity?
Yeah, Coventry, some people know, was one of the first that claimed it had got a kind of smartish campus. So the Wi-Fi was okay. It wasn't good enough to do this. So we upgraded the Wi-Fi in the building, and that upgrade happened, 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still okay, it's still functioning. Sorry, what was the other part of the question? I lost half.
Where were we? Where does Coventry students store their data?
Yeah, so at various times, and for some courses, we've given them big capacity hard drives. There's cloud storage. The university gives them quite a large storage space as part of their network access. So they get a package which is, I think it's, do they get the same as us? I'm pretty sure it's Office 365, and they get a cloud storage space inside that, which is pretty big. Certain courses do still give out hard drives as well for convenience more than anything.
Okay, excellent. So another one, we give all undergraduate students an iPad. Do all students in the media department get a MacBook each, or is it a loan? So I'm assuming that question is around cart use and shared device use, but obviously it's a one-to-one scheme. I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, Shaun.
Yeah, so just going back through those, it's a one-to-one scheme, so every student gets it. Technically speaking, it's a loan until they graduate. As soon as they graduate, they walk away with the laptop. So we are, we're doing a rollout every year. So it's as I said, legally it's ours until they graduate, but they walk away with it. And sorry, again, I lost the other part, the first part of the question.
That was it. Was it a loan or wasn't it a loan? So
yeah.
We covered that a minute ago. So that's cool. Another similar vein, but just to get a succinct answer to this one: do the MacBooks need replacing on a rolling program over the years as Apple support for older models falls off?
Inevitably, you're making a judgment call. We have to decide the number that we're ordering through academia, and academia are very good in supporting us in how we do this. And the academic cycle and Apple's development and release cycle aren't always coincident. But to be honest with you, we've not really run into problems where we've ever had students coming back to us saying, why didn't I get the most up-to-date, Apple have just released an updated version, and why don't I get that one? Where we have thought long and hard, and where what's made us scratch our heads a little bit is, if I'm being honest, some of the courses that some of the students in media, and all the media students and our music technology students all get a laptop. The MacBook Pro is immensely capable, and I was at a demo in the autumn in LA from Adobe, and they were running all the Creative Suite on tablets, on iPads. And we are beginning to think about what technology we actually need to deploy to each of the different courses. But then you've got an issue about parity. So I think that's quite an interesting experiential and equity and frankly messaging problem, that if you've got a student on one course looking over their shoulder and see a student on another course with what appears to be a nicer bit of kit, that might be an issue. But I think we would move to that with a very clear rationale and some kind of equity offer.
Awesome. Does the one-to-one model mean losing the ability to get students to use industry workflows, such as connection to mass storage, such as Nexus or render farms? And what about students who need access to multiple software titles?
The multiple software titles hasn't really been a problem. We have a model in Coventry whereby schools and faculties have to pick up the tab for first gen use software. So if we decide there's a piece of software that we need access to, we will buy the license, and that happens at faculty level or school level. And provided it's going to be used from then on, then it becomes established into the image. So that's not really been a problem. And sorry again, gosh, I obviously have not drunk enough coffee this morning.
The first bit. So yeah, it's about mass storage workflows such as Nexus or render farms. Does the student lose the ability to use that with a MacBook?
No, although again, we are moving. So we've got a course of BA in digital media, and we also in a different school have a games course. And yeah, we are looking at what is the best technology solution for those, because I don't think it's as simple as it's not a Mac versus not Mac problem, but how you negotiate those workflows, I think is different in those spaces. So in the other school, we do still have so we've got a hack lab, and we are, because we're in a redevelopment phase as well, we are setting up a render farm. So we are thinking quite hard about how the students would interact with those workflows. So it's a question. I don't think it's as simple as if you go to a one-to-one scheme, it's impossible. You just have to do your homework, and you have to work closely with your IT service team to work out how that'll happen.
Awesome, thank you very much. How are large assets, in brackets video files, transferred from laptops to on-premise resources? And then OneDrive as a question.
That the OneDrive is the storage solution that the students are offered, so that's part of it. But I guess the question is, when do they need to do that? So we've got staff working on the same technology as the students, and I think we're kind of trying to avoid students just shifting big files back and forth. So where I guess, and people might guess this, it becomes a bit of an issue is when you're doing assessments. So to be honest with you, do we want a couple of hundred students dumping huge files into the university's VLE all at the same time in a semester? No, we don't. So there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to that question, but we've thought about it in each course about how we want students to submit and where we want the large kind of origin file sitting, and they're not necessarily in the same places. So again, if anybody wanted to pick that up, I'd probably want a sort of more detailed conversation about that, because there's not one solution to that, but there's a sort of a principle, which is actually weirdly, the analogy would be with physical submission. So obviously we have a School of Media and Performing Arts. We also have a School of Art and Design. We've just reviewed the submission process for the School of Art and Design, because imagine when you look at it as a system and a process, how sensible is it that a tutor collects or identifies the submission date, and the students walk over to central registry to hand in their work physically, which might be any sort of size or scale, and at which point the tutor then walks over to the registry to collect the piece of work, to take it back to their office to mark it, and it was made in the space that they're marking it. So we've got people wandering back and forth across the campus carrying pieces of physical submission, and that's just crazy. So we're not doing that anymore. We're going to a digital submission and barcoding system, and in a way it's the same principle, I think, for large digital files. You don't want them flying back and forth, or you want them flying back and forth as little as possible. And linking. So leave the file where it is, and the submission contains a link is the best way I can describe it generally.
Awesome. I was waiting for this question to come up. I knew somebody was going to ask it. How will you adapt to teaching in media in the media department due to COVID-19?
Interestingly, I mean, we flipped from face to face. Even, I mean, it's now School of Media and Performing Arts. You know, we had performing arts courses. We had theatre and dance and music. We flipped to online in the space of a week, and I was waiting for the sound of crashing metal and wailing and gnashing of teeth, which largely didn't happen. I think that because we'd got this deployment, it actually meant that people were working with digital workflows in a much more profound way. And it's where I went from the start, which is different pedagogy. So there are issues. I mean, there's been an interesting exchange on the MEXA, the Media and Cultural Studies Association listserver recently about copyright and how you can work in this environment without infringing copyright. There's a whole set of kind of concomitant things that follow on from the way we're working at the minute, but it's affected everything. But I think we were very well set up to adjust to that change. And I think one of the things that going to the mobile scheme made us think very early about, which is, and this may sound an odd way to say it, but why are we in the room? If everybody can work in a mobile way, because we've got this technology, why do we bring people together? And just thinking much more clearly and more purposefully about why we bring people together and what the value of that is. And I think that thought animated the teaching and learning approach that we've adopted over the last few years. And again, I think we challenged ourselves really quickly and really early to say, okay, we understood why we used to be in the room. Can we shift that to an online environment, or is there an analogous approach which will give us the same value without having to be in the room? And each course came to slightly different decisions about how to do it, but we completed the teaching. The assessments all happened. We didn't cancel any assessments. We didn't defer any assessments. Obviously, there's a much more detailed and longer answer to that question, course by course, but that, I think, is the gist of it.
Okay, awesome. I'm just very conscious of time, Shaun, because I know you have to dive in a few minutes. So I'm going to pick a question semi at random, because I'm actually quite personally interested in your response to this. So if it is legally a university device, how do you handle illegal activities being done to it? Would you want students to be able to install things on it, such as Spotify? But could they also torrent or do other things? Does this not bring legal problems? Sorry, I thought the answer would be quite interesting.
It is. So we've got a very strong code of conduct. So the university has a strong IT code of conduct. There's a strong student code of conduct. We refer students to those. We make it very clear what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I think where it's more interesting is around those things that are somewhat grey areas. And I think, there's been a lot of anxiety around copyright infringement in higher education. And so something like BitTorrent, we don't want to see that on these machines. Students were behaving themselves pretty well, and every now and again we'll do a spot check, which will be it'll be, if you like, a technical sweep, just to make sure that we're not getting, we've got a very strong security on the laptops, but every now and again we haul a sample in to just see that it's all working, and this is done in a supportive way. But if we're spotting that people are abusing it, then we message out. By and large, we don't get problems with this. Obviously, there are one or two students in a cohort that size that will do things that they shouldn't. We've had students who've done exactly what you said. We've hauled them in. They're running through the university network, so it'll be detected. I don't want to throw a student out for that, which, strictly speaking, the IT Code of Conduct would enable us to do. What our experience says is that a really stern talking to and a pointer at two things: one, the Code of Conduct, and two, that IT services can see where you are and can see what you're doing because you're running through the network when you're on campus. Usually sorts that out. But students are people. Every now and again they do daft things, and every now and again they do really wrong things, and we deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. And I think that gives you just about enough time before your next meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was amazing. I don't think we were expecting quite as many questions. So thank you very much for fielding all of those, Shaun. Much appreciated. So I will let you. I'll let you go. Just as a presenter note from me, please just close your browser window. Don't hit the red button at the top because that'll end the webinar.
Okay, and the offer was there. If anybody wants to make contact, after this or through you, whichever's the better way to do it, happy to answer more questions.
So Ryan from our marketing team is writing down all of these questions and who asked them. So we have everybody's relevant contact details. So we'll organise some stuff afterwards just to make sure everybody gets their questions answered.
Great. So enjoy the rest of the seminar, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you, Shaun.
Bye.
Right, so everybody's got me again. Congratulations. Let me just set that back to a sensible size. And we are now over to Liam Doyle from Apple Finance. Apologies, we are running a little bit behind, but we thought, and I was chatting to Ryan in the background, we thought it was a good thing to let you guys ask Shaun as many questions while we have him as possible. So we are running a bit behind, but we'll keep going until the end. So, right, over to Liam.
Thanks very much, James. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all having a good day. Thanks very much for joining us. So my name's Liam Doyle from Apple Financial Services. So I sit within the UK Apple Financial Services team. We'll shorten it to AFS because otherwise it's a bit of a mouthful. An AFS is Apple's own finance program that is available to customers and really is there to help them to drive a one-to-one model in this scenario. So to enable the deployment of iPads and Macs in mass to your students, and we can create some really compelling financial options for you. And I'll delve into that in a little bit of further detail. So we believe that all financing is unique as your university, and really we're here to work with you to pull a bespoke financing solution together for you. And Mark Byrne spoke earlier about the need for flexibility, and that's absolutely at the core of our model. Giving customers the ability to design financial solutions that work for you, and that can address either the issues that we see today on the back of the COVID-19 health crisis, but also longer term aspirations to deploy Mac or iPad. We have financing solutions that suit every need. And our ambition is to create financial structures that are so compelling, people would ask us, why wouldn't I do this? And one of the reasons we're able to have such flexibility is that we are leveraging what's unique about this scenario, and that is Apple's high residual values or future values for the devices when you compare them to other manufacturers. That and of course, Apple aren't here to make money from the finance. That's something that we're really clear about. That this is a tool that is available to customers to drive a refresh and upgrade model. And we're built on three key pillars. One is flexibility, the other is being straightforward, and the third is innovation. And flexible, which Shaun was speaking about the degree of Macs that may become lost or stolen throughout the life of a student using it on their course. And actually, we can build that into our modelling. We do have a forgiveness allowance, or also known as a loss pool. So if your data tells you that, say, 5% of the students may lose their devices, we can build that into the pricing. And that means there is no need to return that 5% of that estate to us at the end. And that can really help to balance out that risk. We also do like-for-like returns, so we're not worried about which MacBook comes back to us at the end, or iPad. We're really not here to put any blocks in the way to you getting new devices out to your students. We believe in being very straightforward, no hidden fees or interim rentals. Our master rental agreement is very clean and clear, exactly as you would expect from Apple. And because we're able to leverage that residual value, the structures that we have, the financial structures, are really flexible and really compelling. We'll go into a few extra details on that. So we have options to suit every scenario, from as little agreements that can run from as little as 6 months, with you being able to walk away and hand back those devices, 12 months, 36 months, or 48. The residual values are available against all of those terms, and we'll help you to model some different options. But some universities that we're talking to now are extremely interested in a shorter term solution that will allow their students to continue learning whilst they may not be able to return to campus for the foreseeable future. Other universities are looking at longer term strategies, maybe 3 or 4 year agreements and refresh cycles, sometimes with the possibility for that student to take ownership of that device at the end, sometimes not. We have scenarios that could meet both objectives. And within our program, you can finance any Apple hardware. So all Apple devices hold a residual value and can therefore return a saving versus the cash price. Accessories and peripherals can be thrown in, and also any professional services that academia might be providing you that forms part of that crucial solution. We can wrap that all into our agreement as well. Just to give you some indications, so this is purely based on Apple list price, just as indicative values for what you could expect to see. So we do have a single upfront payment model, which is an operating lease. In this example, it's a MacBook that runs for a 3-year term. And we have one payment right at the beginning, as you would with any CapEx purchase, but you are able to leverage that residual value and get a better than cash price with a view of returning that device at the end. On the iPad 7th Gen, a 3-year agreement using the single upfront payment can bring that iPad down to just £228. And actually, versus the list price that's published on apple.com, that's a 22% saving versus that cash price. All of these prices are net, by the way. And a MacBook Air Retina can be purchased on a 3-year agreement for just £526, representing a 36% saving from that Apple list price. So the next steps, what we love to have the opportunity to talk with you directly and would really welcome a conversation. What we're looking to do is help to understand your current plans with one-to-one deployments. What is it you're looking to put in place in the future? And how can AFS and academia work with you to determine that optimal environment? What options are best for you? And that's where we can pull all of our flexible and our innovative solutions together to really pull a bespoke financing model for you. And that is it in terms of finance. I'm hoping we kept it brief. I was planning to go through the terms and conditions of the lease agreement with you, but I thought that might send you all over the edge. And I do apologise for the noise in the background. It does sound like I'm in an aviary. Apparently, they've all decided to flock at this minute in time. But thank you so much for your time, and we really, really do hope to have further conversations with you directly around the power of Apple Financial Services. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Liam Doyle, accompanied by birdsong. So that was actually quite relaxing, I thought. I should do that in every webinar. So I'm going to try and get through this in as reasonable time as I possibly can. I know there's a bit of an onus on IT at the start in the poll, however, and there is a big however, which I will talk about in a minute. So basically, just from all of that, the main considerations that tend to come out of doing a one-to-one project are the things you can see on the screen right now. So IT process will probably change. It is not a good idea, as I'm sure a lot of you or all of you know, to just stick a bunch more devices in an environment where there weren't previously those devices. Or potentially even that operating system. So getting the IT process nailed at the start is so important because it allows successful delivery of a project like this. And the thing that you'll find, as Shaun touched on earlier, is that if you can be as prepped as you like in the background, you have your finance sorted, you can have all your apps sorted, you can effectively have a deployment sorted. But if the actual handout experience and the in situ experience isn't good, guess what? The device gets blamed. It's not anything else around it, but then you end up with potentially staff and students that don't like the device they've got because the process that surrounds it isn't as optimal as it possibly could be. So it's really, really important to get that bit sorted up front because then you get a seamless rollout as well as a seamless user experience going forward. That may be tweaking some workflows on your help desk, looking at remote support as opposed to physical support, or both. And I think a lot of you are probably doing that right now anyway, as well as the peripherals that are used, storage locations, etc. All of that kind of stuff is the kind of thing we see that isn't necessarily considered up front until either a pilot scheme is in full swing or in some cases a rollout's been done. So I just wanted to make the point that there are a lot of things to consider that happen post physical deployment of devices. Wireless, Shaun made a very good point, is if you are embarking on a one-to-one scheme, okay, right now, you can do it. It's absolutely feasible to do deploy to home to students. We do that with absolutely tons of institutions. When they inevitably come back to campus, there are going to be lots of machines on that wireless network that weren't there previously. So making sure your wireless is capable is a hugely important thing. And I think with the level of people we're talking to here, I've seen the registrants list and everything, but I'm going to say it anyway. I probably don't need to say it. Wireless density is not the same as wireless coverage. So wireless density is the main thing we're talking about here with those devices, i.e. how many devices can be handled by the access points and where they're at, not the strength of reception a device can get based on the vicinity to those access points. So we're almost in a different scenario here, whereas previously everybody was doing heat maps and talking about coverage and things. You were literally talking about a much more dense environment for those access points to work within. So you then need to survey density as almost as important, if not more important, than coverage. So I just wanted to make that point. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that, but it is a thing that trips a lot of people up. Identity is probably one of the most important things that you can consider when you're doing a one-to-one deployment. Like, how are the students or the staff or the users' identities going to be handled? And there's a number of different things to consider there. One is things like Apple IDs for deploying apps and using parts of iCloud, for example. You're going to need to use Apple IDs, but then how is the identity for those Apple IDs handled? There is a way to integrate and federate with Azure Active Directory. That's not something I'm going to go into now, but again, that's a consideration. And there are various things that you need to be aware of if you're going to go down that path. While it's pretty simple to hit the integration button, there are some caveats that you need to be aware of. So again, this is down to IT process and workflow prior to making the deployment decision as to how identity is going to be handled. Also, logins for Mac as well. Are you going to go with just straight local user accounts and then manage it that way, or are you going to want to use Active Directory? If you're going to want to use Active Directory, those machines aren't on premise at the moment, so There's a couple of different cloud enablement technologies Microsoft have for AD and SCCM, but really what you should probably be looking at is something like Azure Active Directory. And there are products like Jamf Connect, for example, you've probably heard me talk about before, that allows you to use your Azure Active Directory identity and the Microsoft Modern Auth to log into the Mac OS. So that way, when you're deploying a machine, you're deploying it straight out of the box using the device enrollment program, for example. And that machine fires up, student answers a couple of questions, and then they are straight through to that Microsoft Modern Auth screen that they put their normal email address and password in. And if you've got MFA enabled on it as well, then MFA will also kick in there, and they handle the Mac login that way. So again, the identity is a big consideration. And as you can probably tell from both of those examples, the way to do it right now the most seamlessly is Azure AD. But there's some other stuff we'll cover on that in a later session. And device management is kind of an obvious one, but if there is anybody on here who is even thinking about a one-to-one scheme without using device management, please have another coffee, rewatch everything we've just said, think about your situation, and then look at my mobile device management, because you just have to do it nowadays. It is absolutely impossible to support Apple devices outside the institute or the perimeters or the perimeter of the institute without having mobile device management in place. If you have mobile device management in place, the device enrollment program for that automated zero-touch shrink wrap out-of-box experience is absolutely key as well. So the device management piece, I'm not going to go into tons of detail on that, as I said, but it is, if you're either on an MDM system at the moment that you're not 100% comfortable with and confident that does everything you need, or you don't have one, or you're considering one, please talk to us about it. There's a number of different options we can take you through and guide you in the right direction there. So that all sounds like a lot of stuff to consider that I've gone through in probably about 4 minutes or so. So wouldn't it be absolutely great if we had a further series of webinars where we covered each of those in a lot more detail that you could attend over the next few weeks and then know absolutely how you get through each one of these? Funny you should ask that. There are a few save the dates we've got for you. So we are doing it's kind of an Apple Estate health check, but it's either readiness or health check, depending on what situation you're in. So we have 2 different time slots for each of these, as you can see on this slide. If you are new to Apple and you are new to using Apple in your environment, there is a specific set of sessions for you. Whereas if you're an existing customer from an Apple perspective and you have devices in your environment, we're approaching it from a slightly different way. We're still covering the same topics, but we're contextualizing them differently, just so you're not getting the stuff that you already know, and just so we're not going too far off into the distance with people who might be new to Apple as well. So we will be sending out promo about these, but this is just a kind of, write the date down, save it for the moment. So on the first one of those, we'll be talking about wireless content filtering, MDM, and an intro to Apple School Manager. That is Tuesday the 7th of July. We then have my apologies, that's what we refer to as environment. The maintenance section then looks at a little bit further down that journey. So that's Tuesday the 14th of July, and we look at further detail on Apple School Manager, integrating MIS, creating managed Apple IDs, that section I spoke about earlier, assigning roles and connecting an MDM server. So that kind of gets you from the pre-prep stage to the we are ready to deploy now. Following that, we then have a deployment section, and that is on Tuesday, the 21st of July. And we'll cover shared devices, device enrollment, apps and books, one-to-one, and device management in a actual deployment scenario. So we've got a lot more depth to go to from each of those topics I spoke about as we get to this session. And then we have the management section, which talks more about ongoing, what you do once the devices are in the hands of staff and students. How do you then manage them, and how do you go forward from there? So we'll cover things like Apple Classroom, Apple Schoolwork, AirPlay and Apple TV, updating devices and maintaining the devices from a software perspective. So that's applications as well as operating system, and then general ongoing management, maintenance, best practices and things like that. So that is the techie bit. We've still got a few questions to go, so we're going to hang around for a little bit. And presenters, I've asked if you can hang around for a couple of minutes after we finish the session to hang around and chat if there's any other stuff that comes in. So I've just noticed outside the questions for Shaun, there are a couple of others. So one of them is 2/3 to 3/4 of our students have non-Apple equipment at home, but some of our teaching needs Our teaching needs software that only runs on a Mac. How can we make this software available to those students in a scalable, cost-effective way? So there unfortunately isn't an option to virtualize macOS in like a VDI environment because the macOS EULA prohibits you from doing so. There's a lot of good reasons for that. But I'm not going to speak on Apple's behalf for that, but basically you can't have a virtualized VDI environment. But what you can do is allow remote access to the Macs that are already present inside your estate. So I'm going to call out Ryan here. If you can stick a link in chat to the VTC webinar that we did a few weeks ago for accessing your Apple estate remotely, I think that would be quite a good response and follow up to that. So there's a whole extra webinar for about an hour where we specifically cover that topic. So in terms of other things, so there's another one saying, are there tools available to support students with either A, poor internet at home, or B, restrictions to internet, such as China, for example, both in the method of using one-to-one or personal laptops? We have students asking for a company-run VPN server access, for example. So again, I would watch the webinar that I just mentioned about accessing your Apple estate remotely. It's not specifically about poor internet at home, but the latter section of it, where we talk about a software-defined network tool, will absolutely help that situation. As a response to your section B there, which is restrictions to internet, such as China, for example, I'm going to go into the, my opinions expressed on my own and not those of Academia Limited or any associated subsidiaries. Don't try and break through the Great Firewall of China. It is not a great idea. Unfortunately, you just have to deal with the restrictions that are put in place. That is not a fight you want to try and have. And there are many, many, many anecdotes of people who have tried. And the scenario you end up in when you're doing that is not good. Basically, whatever you try and do, it will get shut down at some point anyway, because it's a very, very, very sophisticated network structure over there. But I wouldn't jump into that conversation personally. So there's a question here saying, can we get a macOS VNC client on iPad or remote access to iMac Labs? Funnily enough, actually, that's the same answer as I've just given to the last two. So accessing your Apple estate remotely, have a watch of that webinar. That will give you all of the detail there. It's about using a technology that is like VNC, but is more geared towards audio and video usage, as opposed to VNC, which is not and is a bit nasty to try and use in a creative context. So another question saying, can we have another session like this after WWDC to address challenges from new OS versions? Absolutely. We did this before as a physical event. So once WWDC had run and we'd got some more official information from Apple, we did a bit of a physical tour around the country, talking about the new stuff that's come, how you manage, how you maintain. This time, obviously, it's going to be virtual, but absolutely, we will be doing that. So watch out for our promo around that. And then we have a few other questions for Shaun. macOS. So we'll have to send that one to Shaun. Next couple here. How does the system deal with password change? If a student needs to change their domain account password, how does that change integrate with Keychain on the MacBook? If file vault is enabled, how does the change update the secure token? Right. So I'm going to assume that was typed when I was talking about Jamf Connect. So what ends up happening in the Jamf Connect scenario is Jamf Connect actually creates a local account sitting behind it. And then it just syncs the Azure Active Directory credentials with that local account. So when you change a password, it's the same effect as changing a password on a local account on a Mac, which doesn't create that keychain problem that you get when you're direct binding to Active Directory. So it's worth bearing that in mind. There is another piece of technology called Nomad that you've probably heard of before for when you're dealing with on-premise AD. Again, it gets around the keychain password sync issue. And then again, same kind of thing with file vault. It's acting as a local account as far as the OS is concerned. So you have basically the same experience as if the user was just on a local account. And before that question is asked, yes, you can also make that account an admin if you so wish. Next one, are those follow-up academia session dates published on the web for us to view? So I'm going to defer to Ryan on that one. If they are not, they will be shortly, and we will absolutely be sending out marketing communications to everybody that was on these sessions for those follow-on dates. We've just got a couple of other bits of stuff to prep first, but there will be a web page for them, and there will be mail shots, and they'll be on our social media. So Ryan has sent those links in now as well. I think we are at the end. I think that's the end of the questions. So what I'm going to do now is play the outro video. I said Mark and Liam, not Shaun. No, Shaun's gone. So Liam and Mark are still here. Guys, if you can hang around in chat for a few minutes just to answer anything that might come up, and then we will end. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We've got a bunch of follow-up to do. We'll get those extra questions over to Shaun. We'll send you the promo out for the other webinars and things that we're doing. So just watch this space for those. And thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you very much for attending.